Hello everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me again for my extension, build and renovation vlog series, and well done if you survived it through the last episode, the drains special, because not the most exciting topic in the world, but had to be done, and if that is a factor in your build, it is information that you need. But now we're getting to much more exciting stuff, which is really the first steps of an extension build. So if you're building an extension in the UK and you're wondering what to expect, or you're thinking about building one, hopefully some of this information can prepare you for the experience and help you with the journey. So basically, we covered in the last episode the drains and building over drains and everything involved in that, and we also showed you a little bit of the process of building over drains. But before we put a spade in the ground and before we were able to do any of those things, what we had to do was notify building control and the building inspector. So a couple of days before you start building, it is a legal requirement that you let them know that you're going to be starting building work, and they may well want to come down and have a look at what you're doing before you start work, meet the builder, and just check out what's going on. They may not, they may decide that they're going to come just a little bit further down in the process, but you do have to let them know. And there can sometimes be a little bit of confusion between the building regulations and the planning regulations. So planning is basically the process that you go through in order to get permission to build. You go through your council to do that, and they really consider the impact of your build on the local area, neighbouring properties and so on. But the building regulations are regulations, and they cover much more the actual structural integrity of your build and things like insulation, fire safety, and all those sorts of things. So when we had our plans drawn up and once we got those approved, it's not really worth necessarily spending the money on the building regulation side of it until you know you're definitely going to do the build. So at that stage you then want to get all of the structural information. The guy that drew up our plans actually took care of that side of it for us, apart from when we made an amendment, and then we had to go straight to the structural engineer ourselves to organise those bits. So they did all the calculations for the beams, they also did the specifications for the insulation and that kind of thing, but I will cover that in more detail in another episode. But for today, it's just worth knowing that you can't do anything until you've let them know that you're going to build, and they will come down. And then subsequently, from that stage onwards, they'll want to look at specific things like your foundations and things like that. And at those stages, you will need to give them at least 24 hours notice of an inspection. And what a lot of people find, including us actually, is that if you find an inspector that you like, that you've briefed well, that you get on with, it's worth actually finding out which days they work and actually organising your inspections for those days, rather than having to kind of keep briefing different people. It's nice to have the same person throughout the build, and you can be much more helpful to them and them helpful to you throughout the process. And they are there to help you, as well as to check that everything's going to plan. They are there to help you, so they can give you a little bit of advice and guidance as well if you are new to this kind of process. In terms of the cost of the inspections, it really depends on the size of your build, but the standard for our size build is about £495, and once you have initiated your first inspection, they then send out the bill for this. I've got a feeling it actually took a couple of months before we received that bill, but yeah, just worth being aware of. So the reason I'm actually stood down here, which is the side of our extension build here, where we knocked down the previous outhouse and basically erected this whole extension, is because I wanted to give some context to some of our decisions, because for you and your own build, you may want to make slightly different decisions to us, and I have emphasised that we've tried to do this on a budget as much as possible and save money as much as possible. But there were some specifics about this build which made us make certain decisions. So here I am at the moment, and this is basically the span of the side of the extension. So this spans all the way down. We've got the toilet here, utility room, and then all the way down the side. Let me just turn my flip screen over so I can show you. All this wall is basically the side of the kitchen. So we went out 4.5 metres. We also already had a footprint of about 4 metres, so I think we're looking at about 9 metres here. And so this was all foundations that we had to dig, basically. So all of that had to be dug out. What you'll also notice is that this slopes down. So not only did we have to dig the foundations for this area, but we also had to get the depth. So sorry about this door here, by the way. This waste not want not, this door is our previous back door before we had all those replaced, and we are going to use it down in the cellar area here when we get that built, so that's why that's there, but at the moment it's just obscuring all my video and pictures that I'm taking. But yeah, you can start to get a scale for how much we had to build, because here previously was a patio, so we had to get rid of all of this. It was full of rubble, sand, all the patio slabs, everything. That spanned the whole way along. We had to get rid of all of that. Then we had to dig down underneath it and dig down to get the foundations. And as I've explained before, we then decided to dig further and create this basement. But as I'm sure you can see, that is quite a lot of digging. So if we'd just been doing a small rear extension, we were all on the same level, we may well have just dug it by hand, but it would have pretty much been a ludicrous thing to do. And I know some of our neighbours who've done similar extensions in the area who haven't had the same issue with the levels. I know that they've dug theirs by hand, and I know that they've actually looked at us and looked at the amount of stuff that's been coming out of our extension build. There we go, let me just turn this back to me. And I think just wondered what on earth we're actually doing. But it is just the case of, because of that huge drop that we've got there, that we had to think of another plan. So what we ended up doing was actually hiring in a digger, which thankfully was cheaper than we expected it to be. It was about £200. I'm not going to lean against that wall because it's not the best wall ever. It's our next door neighbour's garage. And they had, when it was built blind because we had the annex here, so they never actually got to see this side of it. This was very many years ago that it was built, until we took down our side annex. So it was impossible to do, obviously, an amazing job. But basically, yeah, if you're doing something of this scale, I think getting a digger in makes a lot of sense. It was £200 to hire a digger for 2 days. Thankfully, my other half had, in his job, driven forklifts and things before, so he was perfectly capable of driving a digger, so we didn't have to hire a digger driver in, and we were able to dig the foundations. So that made a massive difference for us, and definitely was a lot cheaper than the alternative, which would have either been spending back-breaking weekends digging it by hand, or paying someone to do so at, say, £80 to £100 a day. It would have mounted up, because I think it would have taken quite a while. So that was the obvious and most sensible decision. But your options there are get a digger or dig it by hand. And in a lot of cases, for a modest extension, I think digging it by hand would be perfectly realistic, and it would be a good way to save money. Obviously, you need to know where you're digging, and that's where setting out comes in. And over on Skill Builder, there's a whole video all about setting out, so if you want to know in more detail exactly what you need to do there, go and check that out. A good tip, once you've got your final plans, is to laminate them so you've got them to refer to. Now, once again, because we had this long expanse and this big area to fill, we weighed it up and we considered the option of mixing the concrete ourselves, and that's exactly what we would have done for a modest extension. But in this case, it just wasn't worth it once again. So we did decide to get a concrete lorry in, which was £1,200, and they mix it for you on the lorry basically and pour it in with a hose. We had a hose as well. So that's it, just a bit of a quick overview on getting started with your building project and your extension project. And for us, this stage was actually a little bit drawn out, a little bit expensive because of various things that were particular to this project, but it doesn't have to be. It can be quite straightforward to get going. And I think once you do, you get enthusiastic for the project, you get engaged and it gets exciting. And then you're on to setting out, to getting some really critical things right in the next stage of the build, and also to sourcing your products if you haven't done so already, because you don't necessarily want to have them stockpiled on your site for weeks and weeks before you need them, and also starting to talk about things like insulation and U values and other little things that you have to get your head around if you're undertaking a project like this for the first time. But that's it for today. If you are enjoying this series, please do give it a thumbs up and share it, and don't forget to subscribe, because I will be back soon. But that's all for today. Bye bye.